Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 383 of the Running Rogue podcast, the new era in the Running Rogue podcast, here with new co host James Dodds. Excited to be talking about the basics of running philosophy, run coaching philosophy, and using our book, Running the Rogue Way, as a vehicle for that. So, we're back for another episode. We teased it last week, and now we're going to dig into what is chapter 2 over the next few episodes because there's a lot of meat to get to there. So we've got a lot of in-depth behind the scenes kind of coaching principles that we're going to be talking about the next 2 weeks. So excited about that. This will be the last episode of 2025. We'll release this week, the week before Christmas, and then we'll have another new one in the new year, but we'll be missing Christmas week. And so whatever you celebrate, Christmas, Hanukkah, Festivus, Kwanzaa, whatever it may be, we hope you take a break and enjoy it. And we'll do the same. And then we'll be back with a fresh episode in the new year. But welcome to the show again, James. How are we feeling today?
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm excited for the simple reason of reinforcement, like just kind of reinforcing some of these. And we've already learned through other discussions. It's like, yeah, there is a lot of content, it's one chapter and you can read it and you're like, that makes sense. But it's like, when we start pulling down on some of these concepts, we're like, oh, maybe we should dedicate a 1 hour episode just to that one singular concept.
We can make an episode out of probably even a single sentence in the book because that's the way we operate. But it is exciting. Again, Running the Rogue Way is out there. We're going to be going through it kind of chapter by chapter as we get into 2026. If you don't have a copy, please go get one. Link in our bio at Rogue Running, or you can check out my Instagram profile as well at Rogue Chris. There's links in both bios to buy. But if you don't buy, it's okay because we'll still be going through it here and you won't necessarily need a copy to follow along. But I do think it would improve your experience if you had one. But it's fun to be kind of have an outline for content because I'd gone 380 episodes or so, kind of covering off on new things and with intentionally trying not to retread topics because I don't like to backtrack. But here we are going back through everything from the beginning, and it's kind of refreshing. And I think it's an opportunity to reinforce the fundamentals as well as, put some fresh takes on a few of these things.
Yeah.
But here we are, last episode of 2025. Before we talk about the first 3 principles that are in chapter 2 of the book that are kind of a double click on our training philosophy, I want to ask you, as you end 2025, how are you feeling about the year?
Oh, wow. There's a lot in my brain on those things, and I'll try to streamline for here. But I feel really good. It's not that the year has been without challenge, and not in any dark way, just plenty of challenges. But I entered the year with the word harmony. And I do have a small sense of pride. I'm talking in my own private, quiet space when I just try to evaluate things, not hierarchical comparisons or anything that anyone else might say this or that makes a person good, etc. But by my own standards in my own quiet, private space, I think the last couple of years, I was very much into just like, all right, if there's a hoop, put the ball through it. It was just task oriented, all drive, and sometimes you're in those phases of life, but it hit me that there's got to be a harmony to things, a melody of things. A drummer isn't going to play as loudly as the guitarist, and then the singer who sings as loud as they can. But on an individual level, to a team level, to the way I interact with my athletes, to the one-to-one conversations that I have, I want to seek that, or I woke up in the new year seeking harmony in those experiences, right? Which requires a little more attention. You have to pay a little bit closer attention because there's all kinds of smart scientific answers that could pop into your head in any given moment and into my head in any given moment. But knowing the right concept at the right time, delivered in the right tone, such that it might have an impact and help my athletes. I mean, there's a harmony to that, and I seek it. And so I'm not going to say I found it in a never-ending kind of way, but I'm glad that was the meditation or outlook for year 2025. So
Harmony. I
harmony.
like it. that's tough to achieve in a world that's pushing for dissonance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just in the global conversation level, but I feel like everything that draws our attention these days, the intention of it is to keep our attention, and to keep our attention, it uses emotion and extremism to, and I don't mean ideologically or politically, I just mean extreme emotion. They want you to be
Mm-hmm.
mad or angry or sad in some intense way in order to continue to want to pay attention to get those dopamine hits. It's hard in that world to find to find harmony.
Yeah.
So give us one tip, one thing this year that helped you take a step in that direction.
Oh, a tip. Gosh,
Sorry, put you on the spot
it's
here.
very difficult for me to coach from a place I'm growing in.
Okay.
So it starts with a meta level idea. I need something to guide me, and so just by saying that's what I'm seeking. I mean, we talk about this as coaches all the time, like the concept of progression overload. It's like if you spend your time focused on something, you're gonna either get that something or discover something really important about that you otherwise wouldn't have. I mean, you'll come so far, even if it's, quote, not the ideal vision in your head. So for me, I find tremendous value in be wise about what you pick as your guiding narrative. Like, do I want to display power? Do I want to display intelligence? Will I use power, intelligence, science, all of that in the I guess goal to experience harmony? Sure. Those are subcomponents. But I think it's wise to have the right guide at the top. So that alone is a thought. I mentioned it a second ago, but paying attention, that's been one of the most, I would say, get the right guide, pay attention, and then there's a level of trust. Now, I will say I'm an ENFJ in Myers-Briggs, so I'm an intuitive feeler, and that really matters. So, there may be people who never operate by what I'm saying, and this could just be limited to my personality, if you consider the magnitude to which it impacts me. But otherwise, people can learn from this. It's like pick the right guiding thought, then you pay very, very, very close attention. And then that trust layer is whatever pops into your head, you pay attention to that at the same time. So if I'm having a conversation with an athlete and a song's popping or an image is popping, or I get this old quote that I thought I forgot, but somehow it came back, I'm in there asking, why am I thinking on that? And what is it about this person that's causing that to pop up inside of me? Because I didn't wake up thinking about it, right?
Right.
So it's kind of an artsy type. I actually feel somewhat uncomfortable explaining it because I'm sort of like
tell.
it's a dimension that I find a lot of value in. You could just simply call it developing intuition, but I think I'm going to stop there because, I'm growing in this space.
What I'm hearing is one, in some way, set an intention,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the point you said about having a guide. And I think that's an important point for a lot of people. And it could be as big and woo-woo as, how was the universe created kind of guide, right? But it could also be as simple as, what's your goal? What do I want to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
That could be very tactical, but giving yourself something to always turn back to when you feel the dissonance popping in, I think is a helpful construct. And then just listening. And I think you meant both listening to the people in front of you that might be sharing information, but
Mm-hmm.
also, or that you might be relating with, but also listening to your own intuition and letting that guide you versus kind of passing it off as, oh, that was just a weird urge. I'm going to let it, I'm letting it fly by. So those are good tips.
If I could respond real quick, because one, I always love when you summarize what I say, because I'm like, oh, is that what I said? Like I'm in that space. Oh, yes. No, you did. You're good at codifying. And then where I would say that there could be some application to tie some of this into the running, and we'll talk about this later in the conversation. But I always want to try at the very least to be like, hey, I'm not being cosmic. This does apply to running. And when we get into feel-based layers and how to feel, quote, what is the purpose of my workout today? How am I responding in the workout in real time? Coach said 90-second recoveries. I'm not feeling recovery. The ability to maybe make a black belt level adjustment in real time on the fly and get the outcome that you're pursuing. To me, that is the same thing. It's just as applied to running. And then
Right.
when I look at New Year's, I don't call them resolutions. I got this from my best friend, but it was like he picks a word or an intention. I like that better, an
Yeah.
intention for the year. So to me, it does apply down multiple levels of analysis or multiple levels of abstraction.
Well, I prescribe to the same idea. I'm not a huge resolution person, not to say that that isn't a good thing for people, but for
Hmm.
me it's like if I want to change something in that way, it's just do it whenever, not I don't need January 1 to roll around to create a new habit, for example. But I do like the word or theme kind of concept, and I think it's good to have it and then to be able to look back and say, "Hey, what progress did I make?" especially as you're trying to figure out what the next theme is.
Hmm.
And so maybe we can save the 2026 theme for another one, maybe the next episode. But my word this year, as long as we're sharing, and I know we're off topic, but this is interesting to me, and I think it does apply back, was simplify.
Hmm.
Simplify. I think we talked about this in an early Renegade podcast of 2025. And it wasn't, I think I had a different word, but I morphed it to simplify because I was in a place where my life wasn't simplified enough, and I was creating a lot of stress for myself, doing too many things and making life a little too complex, and that was spilling over into added stress, which ultimately it was affecting me physically as well, as I would find out with some cortisol testing that I did in March. But it was simplified. Take things off the plate.
Hmm.
Focus on the things that matter. And I remember taking a plane ride back from a trip we did with the family in January of this year, I guess January 2025, where I was writing down what are the things that matter, and everything that's not on that list can go away or
Hmm.
can fall away. And so that's been my theme for the year is simplify. Try to take some of the stress away. And I'm someone that'll do and do more, and I have a hard time saying no to people as a people pleaser. So there were a lot of steps to take to get there. But as I reflect back on that theme for me in 2025, I feel like I did a pretty good job. I mean, I could always do better,
Hmm.
but I did a good job of kind of stripping some things away that needed to be stripped away and refocusing on the things that are important to me. And now I'm excited moving into 2026. I think there's a new word kind of bubbling in my head that I've been thinking about, which I won't share yet. But also there's a kind of gentle reminder to myself that now that I've kind of taken the steps to simplify, that doesn't mean it's time to complexify again.
Hmm.
So it's a reminder, to keep the simplification theme going while I step into a new year and new theme.
Yeah, yeah. I talk to athletes about that a lot with Y work. And I actually got it from an athlete, so compliment to one of the athletes. But it was was talking to a woman named Carrie in the Rogue Rising group, and she was talking about her why, and I was like, "Oh, so you changed it out? You no longer run for your dad?" And she was like, "No, I still run for my dad, and I run." And I was like, "Oh, it's additive."
Yep.
Like I thought it was a beautiful expression where it was like, "Yeah, okay." Now, as you simplify, also you add another layer into that simplification, and whatever that word is, I'm holding back on my 2026 word as well because I haven't settled on it. It's forming though.
Yeah.
Like I have an idea and it's definitely going to relate to the idea of channeling. So channeling this harmony into the desired outcome. I'd say I can identify the moments now. So then the game's going to become how do I channel that ability to identify? Going to work on that though. Not committed to it.
Yeah.
So
Well, I've got a word percolating too, but not quite ready to share it. But I have to, as I wrap this year, kind of remind myself, don't now that you've kind of simplified, don't now start to add back just because you're in a good place again.
mhm.
And honestly, the podcast, was a part of that process. I mean, there were months of the year where I wasn't creating episodes, not because I didn't want to or have the desire to or want to be talking to you guys, but was because I had to simplify and something had to fall away. And at times this did. I do think we're at a place where we can bring it back sustainably, especially with you as a co-host. So I'm excited about that now, but obviously you have to be careful not to overdo it
Yeah,
at any level.
we'll be watchful.
So there you go. All right. Well, that's a little bit more intro than you expected, but here we are. We're going to be talking about chapter 2 of the book, where we really double click on the reason behind our coaching philosophy. And there's 6 things in there on the training side, and then 6 things in there on the racing side. We're going to probably spend 2 episodes on each side of that, because I think we can cover the 6 in training on 2 episodes, which we've already done a little dry run on, and then the 6 on racing in 2 episodes. So this might end up being 4 episodes. We'll see, because we can opine on the philosophy to great extent, but I think it's important because it is about the fundamentals and understanding the why. I was on Des and Kara's podcast this week. If you haven't checked out the Nobody Asked Us this week, the coaching episode, go check it out. You'll see it and hear a familiar voice. But one of the things they asked me was, was there an area of the book that would have been hard to kind of keep tight and efficient? And to me, this is the area, because I can opine on the reasons why we do things almost infinitely. And also because I think it's so important to understand the why before anybody does any of this stuff that's in the book. I don't want people to do things because I said so. I mean, if that's the way they choose to operate, fine. But I want people to ideally dig in, understand the why, and then be able to see the application of the why from there. So that's where we're going to spend some time on, is kind of the fundamental principles and the why behind those principles. So here we go with this one, where we kind of hit the first 3 on the training philosophy side. First one being what I would consider in many arenas kind of a platitude, or something you hear maybe too often in a lot of venues, but that I think applies in actually a more direct and specific way here in the running world. And it's the phrase simply, do the work. You've got to be consistent. You got to do the work, and you've got to be consistent. That's one of the number one things you can do to improve as a runner and to reach your full potential. But we hear that phrase all the time in different ways, where people are like, oh, it's just simple. Do the work, put your head down, do the work. And while there is kind of the messaging implied in those contexts applies here, it's just a matter of like putting your head down, do the work. But I think here it applies in a more specific and scientific way, which is to say that unless you do the work, it doesn't work. So, I think there's places where you can do less work and kind of get away with it in maybe different areas of expertise. But from a running perspective, the most important thing you can do is be consistent. If you do nothing else, if you have no genetic talent, if you have no speed work, if you're not trying to, set the land speed records at all, you're just focused on improving as a runner at the macro level, then that starts with the physiological change that comes from being consistent, doing the work day in and day out, not just for a week or a month, but for years and even decades, because that causes the physiological changes that are required to actually get what you want.
Yeah.
So I'll pause there.
Well, my head's popping with a ton. One, I would say that, do the work, be consistent, develop the routine. That some of the physiological changes that come with that. There's just a myriad of them. It's like in the science. It's like the more you spend time on your feet, your bones are going to get denser. So be out there quite a lot, right? To prevent stress fractures. Your muscle fibers, the more you recruit them, they develop the endurance component, but also just the engagement, like it's use it or lose it. Our brains start to change. Our entire dopaminergic system will realign itself to, if you set out with a goal and that's point B and you're at point A, every little baby step that you cross in that direction will release dopamine. And so we quite literally will retrain ourselves to become excited. So whether it's up in the brain or down in the muscle fibers, or it's mitochondria developing both bigger and more plentiful, which creates ATP, which is the fuel of the cell. It's like, I think we could go on and on and on and on about some of the physiological developments that occur through it. But I think we also have been exposed to these concepts, like the Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours are popping in my head. It's like, we see it everywhere in life. Like the more you do something, the better you become at it. So it's almost tough to defend right now because I'm like, I'm just like, yeah, anything you want, you got to do repeatedly.
The nuance, the difference to me though, is that in those contexts, it's about developing expertise, and there is expertise with running. I'm not saying there's not, but with running, there's really just physiological change that happens by putting in the time that you don't get to see, you don't get to claim on your resume. You can't, it's hard to even quantify it or describe it. It's like, well, now I have bigger lung capacity. Now I have more red blood cells to carry oxygen in my bloodstream. Now I have more capillaries. Now I have more mitochondria, as you referenced, in my cells. So it's not like you can take pictures of that stuff. It's not like you can, I mean, you can measure it, but it's harder to measure, and it's not external. You can't see it. It's not a skill set you put on a resume that, well, I did all these courses and I learned these skills and now I'm a black belt in X, Y, and Z. It's no, we've got to actually do the work to make the physiological change that's going to actually allow me to take oxygen from the air, take it to the working muscles, and make them go through that respiration process, creating fuel from, or using fuel to make them move and move faster. So it's different in that sense, right? It's not just like you are developing skill sets, but you're also just purely brute force developing physiological change. And that to me is kind of the difference between that and, becoming a woodworker. I don't know what the right expertise example is. It's like, well, in those cases, it's, can I do this skill or not? Can I do this task or not? Do I have, and then for each one, there's probably a layer of, or layers of those skills that you can start adding on expertise where you can say, well, can you do that or not? And with running, there are those pieces, but at the very core, it's about aerobic development. And are you committed to doing the work, being consistent the way you need to be in order to develop that brute force aerobic system or not? And how long and how willing are you to do it year in and year out?
Yeah.
Now, on this one, to me, when this kind of gets brought up, I think there's some things that pop into people's minds that are like, well, that's hard for me because, right? So the question to me that I'd like to or get to now is, well, can we kind of touch on some of those challenges that people have with doing the work and being consistent with it? One of them is, well, my schedule is too busy. I don't have time to do the work. What would you say to that person?
A couple of things come to mind. And I think you and I have talked about this before, but it's like, yeah, do the work. Like sometimes that can come off as like no days off or, stay hard, etc. And we don't want to give it in that like rough, edgy tone per se. But I think on the commitment end, you need to have this like, I'm committed to, quote, doing the work. And then when you step into the planning of said work, like trying to juggle this complicated schedule, I would say first, you got to start with that check, like, am I in? Am I committed? Because then at that point, you could start to gamify things. And I think that's something that we set ourselves up well for, and that we try to teach people principles so that they can space out their week or take the principles and make the adjustments around their schedule, whatever it may be. Maybe they're a shift worker, or maybe they're operating around kids' schedules, or I even have an athlete right now whose dog had surgery, and so she's trying to use a treadmill, and she's like, sometimes I step off, so some of these runs might get interrupted. I'm like, the reason why people have crazy schedules is like never ending. And I think it could be applied to the most controlled and routine-driven person all the way to the wildest schedule ever, because even that person over here that's extremely controlled every now and then faces pattern interruptions that they'll have to adjust to. So I think at the core, I would say, are you committed? Because if you are, that puts you into that problem-solving mindset of like, oh, okay, well, I'm working 3 12s on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So now what can I take from the book or the podcast? Knowing about spacing and knowing that I don't want to do my quality the day before my long run, I can treat my week like a puzzle and remap it. So I'm saying, I guess my response as I verbally process on everyone is first have that like almost black and white type of thinking where you're like, I'm absolutely committed. I know where the next 20 or 22 weeks are going to go in order to get to X race. And then you look at week by week and you become a person and you're just sort of like, all right, this week's going to look different than last week. That's where you go into gray thinking and problem solving mindsets to try to to try to get the most important runs operating within the reality that you exist in, crazy schedule, whatever.
Yeah. And making sure it's balanced with recovery appropriately and all of that. We'll get into the tactics of building a routine as we go, but I think what you're saying is, are you committed to doing it? If so, then you find a way to create a routine that's sustainable. And if your schedule is intense, and we coach a lot of people that have crazy schedules, have challenging commitments with work and family and everything else, but you see them make it work because when they're committed, they're able to do it. And if they're not, they don't understand their goal or they don't understand their purpose, then they're probably going to fall away from it. And by the way, I think it's also important to point out that it's okay if you don't want it and you don't want to make it work, or if there are windows of time where you can't. But in those windows of time where you do want to make it work, then having a consistent routine is fundamental. It's foundational. And unless you can sustain it, you're going to constantly underperform what you want. So, but we'll cover the tactics of that as we progress into future episodes. Second bullet that I want to get to kind of dovetails with one nicely, which is that miles matter. This is probably the most important thing, is you got to run more to run faster. And sorry, Runner's World used to have this training schedule called Run Less, Run Faster, which I would make fun of because they were trying to strip away everything but the most important elements from the schedule, which was in their mind like a long run and a speed workout. But then therefore they were missing the recovery elements. And that's not to say that you can't get faster on a program like that if you're starting from zero. But at some point you're going to get hurt or you're going to plateau if you're following a plan like that. But regardless, not throwing stones at Runner's World, because I think they let that program appropriately die. But you got to put in the miles to get faster from whatever your starting point. The elites do it. They're running 100 to 120 miles a week. Does that mean you have to do 100 to 120 miles a week? No. But if you're at 0, can you get to 10? If you're at 25, can you get to 35? If you're at 40, can you get to 50 or 55? If you can, and you can start stacking miles, then you're going to get faster, even if you're not doing a lot of speed workouts.
Yep. It makes me think of Lydiard's old quote, which, Lydiard is, who we're based on. And he always said, miles are like money in the bank. And that when I was a brand new runner, I think I'm thinking on this because you were like, if you're 0 to 10 or 10 to 20, and kind of, I was thinking of an accept where you are and build from their concept. But first, it's like when I was absorbing all this information as a brand new runner, it's like you get really motivated and you get really excited. And a lot of like what you'll see on Instagram or out in the ether is all centered around some type of quality workout. And usually when you're doing a quality workout, there's a coach there and they're explaining all the key details. And so it's easy to get swept up and you're just like, ooh, 400s do this in my body. And that's why I'm going to do them. And it's like, that's that really cool, sexy workout. And I need it. And it's like, remember, all of the cool workouts that get popularized and marketed on Instagram, etc., that all needs to, I almost want everybody to understand the concept of nested domains or understanding like concentric circles that sit within one another. And it's like, if they did, then it would start to make sense in that like your quality mileage, the ability to do those workouts, they are kind of cool markers of progress, and they are also progressions of a stress overload in order to stress you and make you better. Like there's so much there, but it's almost like that's phase 2. Like if you don't even get to experience those if it's not nested in a much, much bigger domain or nested inside of a much bigger circle that is, quote, your mileage, because that's what it ultimately develops everything you said physiologically earlier. The lungs, like the recruitment of fibers, all of it. Like we don't get to that aerobic engine without increasing our mileage. And in so doing, we can do big qualities. In so doing big qualities, then we can race like we want on race day. But I think most people are like, wait, that person ran a 3-hour marathon? And what was their peak quality? Cool, I need to copy that. And then they drop off the most important. It's like removing the foundation and everything falls out.
Right.
You know, this is the core. The mileage is the core. It's the base upon which all sits.
Yes, and the bigger your base or the foundation, being that mostly easy volume, the higher the peak can get. When you short circuit that additional volume, that foundation, then the lower the peak that you get, and the more likely you're to be injured. And there's a whole ripple effect. But people struggle with this, I think, for a lot of reasons. We talked about the schedule and time one. Some people will say, well, I can't run that much mileage because I'll get hurt if I do. Or I can't run that many days because I'll get hurt if I do. And we'll talk about that more here on the third principle. But if you're getting hurt or if you're not able to sustain the mileage, then there's a couple of things that could be happening. But the most likely is you're probably going too fast on most of it. And therefore you're beating yourself up and not allowing yourself the opportunity to recover from the running that you're doing. But also you're not fitting it all together in a way that's sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's what the book helps you do. That's what we'll help you do as we kind of go through it. So we'll show you the way. But it starts with a commitment to say, hey, okay, I fundamentally understand why I need to run more. And maybe I've had failure doing that in the past, but I'm going to listen and learn and find a new way because this is a well-paved path with thousands of runners in our system and then in other systems that have used mileage as a foundational element and had success.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're able to do it and you do it the right way, then it not only builds on itself to help you reach new things, but it also makes you more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
The more you run, the more resilient you are in the miles that you have, the more consistent you're able to be. And it all works together.
Yep. You know, because I thought of a couple of things. One, because I referenced Lydiard, I think you should tell him about Lydiard. And two, I was also going to say that the combination of these first 2 points, in some ways, like it's a form of encouragement too. So if you know, like if you're brand new and you're super motivated and excited, it's like, one, we just gave you the direction. Like when in doubt, if you're out there training on your own, you don't have a community to like coach you up, et cetera. And, you know, maybe someone listens to your podcast, but they haven't been able to like ask you a direct question. It's like, you know where to point your nose. The goal is to start increasing mileage. So you have a very direct, simple little baseline application. It's like, with all my newfound excitement, I want to go crush hill work and rip off fast quarters. It's like, no. While you're figuring it out and you're growing and developing, we want you to focus on a routine so you can build that commitment. And we want you to point your nose towards increasing mileage while being reasonable. Like you said earlier, you have to humbly accept wherever you're at the time. So if you've never ran anywhere before, you might be doing a walk jog, right? Where you're just targeting 20 minutes out there on my feet, 1 on, 2 off, whatever. We can go as low as anybody needs to go in order to get that snowball forming. But I guess I wanted to bring this up because I want it to feel like a sense of encouragement. Like in the same way that in order to get all these results that are going to take a long time, there's the positive end of like, hey, no one day, like you can shake off imperfection like easily because the goal is to get consistent. All right, you missed today. Don't do it again. I grew up a golfer. Number one thing I learned as a golfer was don't hit 2 bad shots in a row, you know? So even if you're not on fire, just be less worse, right? And sometimes that really helps me. So anyway, it's like very simple applications. It's like, you got to do the work. You got to be consistent so you know where to point your nose. Am I getting a lot quite frequently? Or am I getting something quite frequently? Over time will increase how much on top of that. And those two just sit really well together. It's like get frequent, then increase that volume.
Yeah, and you were talking about Lydiard, Arthur Lydiard. kind of the father of modern distance coaching. For those that don't know that name, we'll kind of introduce you to him now. He's this kind of crotchety old New Zealander farmer guy who back in the 50s started experimenting on himself to see what would happen if he ran 200 miles a week. And when you're running 200 miles a week, you can only do it one way. You have to go really slow, do it really easy in order to make it all work, in order to stay healthy while doing it. And so that's what he started doing. And lo and behold, even though he wasn't running fast at all, he was getting faster from that volume. And he would eventually scale that back, and through trial and error and playing with it on himself, and then eventually athletes that he started coaching, to the point where he coached a couple of athletes to the 52 Olympics, I think it was 52 or 54 Olympics, in the 1500 on one end and the marathon on the other end, both doing essentially the same training, very volume based, showed up at the Olympics and both got medals, even though their training, except for the very end of the training block, was pretty much identical, just focused on that volume, but they were running distances on the ends of the spectrum at the Olympics. Sure enough, people saw that and they said, what the hell is happening in New Zealand? Who is this guy, Arthur Lydiard? And the rest is kind of history.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've learned things on top of that since the 50s, and there's more nuance to it now. And certainly he learned as he progressed as a coach. But I would say for the most part, most modern distance training at the elite level is based on Lydiard's core principles to this day. And that's really the foundation of what we use. But it started for him of just experimenting with himself on that easy volume. And then suddenly, wow, magically I'm getting faster, even though I'm only running easy. And why is that? It's because, and we'll talk about this in a second with the third principle, it's because when you run slow and easy, you actually develop the aerobic system in a better way than when you run fast. And so then it all actually compounds to make you faster, even though that's a bit counterintuitive. So that's a little bit of background on Lydiard. The other thing I wanted to mention in kind of response to your comment is that this is where I really like the idea of yearly mileage totals as a milestone for people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think miles, when you're looking at it from week to week or month to month, for various reasons, it can be kind of up and down. And through a training cycle, it'll grow and then crescendo, and you've got tapers and recovery from races and all of that. So as you look at it across a year, it's going to have this natural ebb and flow. But when you look at the year in total and you say, hey, did I run 300 miles this year, or 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000? If you look at that number, it's a pretty good measure of your consistency, one, and two, your average level of volume that spans across training cycles. And it starts to become, to me, a really fundamental marker for the everyday athlete of how much am I truly getting accomplished across cycles in terms of building that foundation and keeping it active. Because I would submit, and you don't have to be there yet, but that if you really want to reach your potential or get close to it, you need to be doing at least 2,000 miles a year, 40 plus miles a week over 52 weeks. And again, that's after you've built there. It's not today, but I think that for the everyday athlete is a pretty good benchmark to have in their head that indicates consistency, the right volume level to really start tapping into potential. And most people might look at that and say, well, that's a lot. 40 miles a week, I don't think I can do that for a whole year. And the answer is you can.
Yeah.
If you do it the right way and if you're committed to it, as you said earlier.
Yeah, and usually when you're trying to bite that off mentally, it's because you're looking at yourself exactly where you are in this moment. But that's what we were trying, I think, to hit on in those first couple of bullet points of like, remember everything, like your body's going to change as you get more efficient. Then the idea of getting out the door for a blissful, easy 5 to 6 miler, like that starts to feel like a joy, right? And so then all of a sudden, racking up all these miles throughout the year becomes more doable. If right now 6 miles is twice as long as you've ever ran before, or twice as long as you've run in the last 6 months because you had some surgery, sure, the idea of 40-mile weeks for 52 weeks a year can sound very daunting, but it's like, remember, go back to the basics. It's like set the routine, do the work, start focused on growing the volume. And like you said, they're not going to be there overnight, but it's like that's the direction we're sending you.
Right. And yeah, whatever your starting point, start there.
Yep.
Stay grounded there and then take the next logical step to build it. And again, we'll kind of talk about the tactics of that as we get through these episodes, but it's foundational. If you're listening, you need to say, hey, looking yourself in the mirror, am I doing enough to reach my potential? Could I be doing more? Most people, the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the question is how, and we'll get to the how as we kind of talk through this. But I want to get people to the how and get them over the hump of why am I doing this again?
Yeah.
And we talked about already, but summarizing the why, it's because the amount of mileage you run is going to be one of the single most important determinants of how fast you are.
Yep.
So,
and real quick, before we get into the how, I wanted to like hit that, like most people could do more. I want to split this hair because I think it's valuable there. And I've seen this in interactions. So to clarify from our end, it's like from a capacity standpoint, what we believe athletes are capable of, and what we hope you guys believe you are capable of. I promise it's more than you've probably even done thus far. But if it's ever like your question about crazy schedules earlier, if sort of like if you're in a space in life where you're like, I can't do more, meaning like literally 8 hours a week of training is all I can devote to this because the rest of my life is so dang busy, that's a different kind of you can do more. We never go around pushing people like, hey, just do more, like, and they're only getting 4 hours of sleep or something because they're stressed out, they're juggling life, whatever. So for what it's worth, I wanted to split that hair from a capability standpoint.
It's an important hair to split. And I think the full sentence, if I were to state it on this topic, is miles matter, but only as much as you can recover from those miles, which kind of accounts for that schedule and kind of craziness factor. But most likely you can do more than you think.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the phrase. Miles matter, but only as much as you can recover from those miles. But most people can do more than they think, which I generally find is universally true. And it's just a question of, am I committed? Am I creative enough with my schedule? Because we see people with crazy schedules do a lot more than you would think. And that's not to say there aren't moments when you shouldn't, because there certainly are moments where life needs to take the front wheel. But when you want something and you're saying, hey, I'm committed enough to it to listen to two guys talk about it on a podcast, then it's time to get creative and figure it out.
You're already pretty invested. Might as well make good on that investment.
Exactly. And we're here to help you do that. And one of the things, number 3.3 in chapter 2, is in order to make it happen, and this may be the most counterintuitive part of our kind of training philosophy content, is you have to slow down to get faster. And this is one where people look at me and they kind of look at me crossways. Even those that might eventually be convinced still struggle, to the point where I wrote a whole poem about it that I shared 3 or 4 episodes ago.
You're like, I had to appeal to art, guys. Like, how do I get it through to you?
Right. So even people that I know believe this to their core from a logic standpoint, still fight it from a mental standpoint because it is a bit counterintuitive, but it's so important. And the reason why you have to slow down in order to go faster is at the highest level twofold. One is that in order to build the aerobic system in the right ways, to do all the physiological things we were talking about earlier, from your lungs to your bloodstream to your capillaries to your mitochondria to the respiration process itself, you have to be in easier efforts in order to optimize those parts of the system. And this is an oversimplification, but it's kind of like this. You can't build the system while you're using the system at max capacity. So when we run fast, we're using the system kind of not necessarily at max capacity, but at high capacity. You can't build the system when you're using the system at max capacity. You can't build the plane while you're flying it, to use kind of that analogy. So, but you can build the system when you're going easy enough. And that is just so fundamental, but it's, again, so counterintuitive. I relate it back to strength training. I think it's actually the exact same physiological concepts that we accept out of hand without thinking about it in the strength world. Or that for some reason, when you apply it to running, people are suddenly like, no, it can't be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that? That is, if I were trying to improve my bench press, and let's say I wanted to bench 150 pounds max. I don't actually know what my max bench press is, but let's just say, for example's sake, what would I do? I would go to the gym, and a couple times a week I would bench press, and I would do 3 sets of 8 reps perhaps at 120 pounds, 110 pounds, maybe even starting lower than that. And I would do that consistently. And then occasionally I would go in and see if I could do that 150. But I would never rep 150 except in those moments of testing my strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so we accept that as the way strength training works. And if you think about it, it's the exact same thing we're talking about here, which is that in strength training, in order to get stronger, you need to do higher volume, more reps at lower weights in order to get stronger. In running, it's the same. You need to do higher volume, more miles at lower intensity, slower paces in order to get stronger. It's the exact same thing that we use in strength training that we just don't even question. And so applying that analogy here, that's the most important thing that running slow does, is it allows you to develop the system in the right way. And when you get out of that range, that easy range, then you're starting to use the system instead of build it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second reason that we go slow is so that you can stay healthy while doing it. Because if you're not healthy, then you get hurt, and then you can't be consistent. You can't do the mileage that we talked about already. And the nice thing about this running easy thing is that you actually develop aerobic capacity in a huge range. And the difference between the benefit of aerobic capacity building, once you're in that easy zone, it's actually really a wide zone at which you get the same benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And so why wouldn't you operate on the slower end of the range so that you can get the aerobic capacity building benefit while putting as little stress on the musculoskeletal system and the neuromuscular systems as possible, which allows you then to feel better the next day so that you can go do the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but what do you think?
I think I just want to keep reinforcing it. It's like you had mentioned the question of like, all right, if there's this like 3-minute window that you could operate in, why wouldn't you hang towards the back? And it's like, when I actually think about the answer to that question, you know, from an empathetic disposition, it's sort of like, why do athletes do this? They're actually paying me to tell them what to do, and then they go run faster. So they get a worse result despite having spent the money and the time to listen to the answer despite after the instruction, right? And so that's worth sitting with, right? Like why would they? I think one is like people need to detach like in their heads like markers of success for every single day. Like even Dr. Andy Galpin, who's an authority that I really look up to, and it's someone you could trust if you're trying to learn exercise physiology in general. He would even be someone who says 1 day's worth of data is just worthless. It really doesn't serve you. Now, when you stay, not just in general exercise physiology, but you stay in this lane of running only, it matters even more. Like 1 day's worth of data really means nothing at all. And so where I'm going with that is like, if you're constantly trying to measure yourself and get to some answer of like, am I being successful? Like, I know I want to run 8-minute miles on race day, and so I need to run everything at 8 minute here. It's like, all right, you're probably looking for affirmation, and you forgot that the training is not there for affirmation. The training is there to help you develop. We're trying to help you use the right ingredients to, quote, bake your cake, stealing that from Lydiard as well. And so I think when people realize, oh, there's multiple ingredients, it's like, cool, maybe now we're starting to work with something. It's like, yes, there are multiple different ingredients. And we already gave the science a second ago, but it's like the only way to, quote, get faster, when we think it from a practice-based and sort of like a output-based mindset, well, then we think fast running equals fast running. But if we were to think about a car, we know that a car, no matter how sexy it is, it could be like the latest release of some great Porsche. And it's like, all right, cool, got a great car. No gas in it, you get nowhere. What is the gasoline for the human body? It's ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So if people are starting to think like, why were they talking about capillary beds and aerobic development and oxygen out of the sky into the lungs, heartbeat down into working muscles? It's like all of that is lining up, even the big and healthy mitochondria. It's all pointing towards the production of ATP, the body's fuel. And so if you can just tell yourself that my car won't go fast without gas, what is gas? It's ATP for my running. How do I generate more ATP? I run slowly. I know that without the science, this is our most counterintuitive principle. People want to fight it like crazy, but we preach it like crazy for everything I just said and you said 10 minutes ago with a few different words.
Yeah, and we live it, and then we see it applied in our athletes, and it works. This is not a dirt road. It's not a single track that we're on. This is a paved path, paved highway, in fact, that not just this principle, but all these principles work. And this is the most counterintuitive one. It might take a second to accept and to really fully embrace, but we're asking you to embrace it and just imploring you in a sense, because it'll save you a lot of headache if you embrace it now. It also makes the runs a lot more fun when you can take them at a leisurely pace. And again, that's not every run. You know, as we get into it, we'll talk about quality runs, which is our term for speed work. That has its place, but it has its place. And that place is generally closer to 10, 15, maybe 20% of the mileage that you're putting in versus the other 80% or more, 80 to 90%. That is easy running, the real foundational stuff. So that's where you get faster, is you get faster on the slow days where you're able to build mileage. And if you do it consistently, then we promise you that you're going to do things you never thought possible in this sport. And if you fight it, you're going to probably end up injured. You might end up improving for a little bit of time, but you'll plateau and you'll get frustrated. And then you'll be listening back to this episode on another day, trying to figure it all out.
What's funny is that you might get faster for a little time. That instantly hit me. It's like friendly reminder, each like phase of training is about 6 weeks long. So someone can get 3 weeks of data. No, my new approach, run less, run faster, is working. It's like, I'm sure it did for 3 weeks.
Right.
But getting on a tangent.
Yes. All right. So that's the third one. And really all we wanted to share in this episode in terms of these three. It's do the work, miles matter, and you got to go slow to go fast in order to do those miles. Any summary thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I think that was a great summary. But I will add I'll tie a little bow on it, because I did not know at the start you were going to ask me about the year and reflections. And I both felt this and thought this when you had mentioned that annual mileage targets are a really good marker, I guess, to put athletes' minds towards. And I thought, man, those married together nicely in that, like I said, the year wasn't always harmonious. I was just looking for the harmony in each challenge. Like, there's probably something to learn. What am I supposed to learn? You were like, I'm going to simplify, but I'm sure it got complicated at times all throughout. There's always that ebb and flow. And it's like, I think something sitting underneath, our whole conversation is that same idea of like, point your eyes towards the whole year of mileage next year, be consistent, do the work, go slow so you can reach that, mileage, that annual mileage target, and accept the imperfection. Like, it's, that's your intention. You know which direction to go. One day's worth of data isn't going to make or break you.
Yeah, it's the body of work that matters. No one day matters, as we like to say. It's the body of work. It's all of them summing together that matters. And you don't have to be perfect. In fact, if you're perfect, that actually is probably suboptimal, because that means you're running on days that you're sick or you've got too much stress or something popped up that should actually hold you back. So it's not about perfection, and we'll get to the nuance of it as we get further into these conversations. But it is about looking at that macro level, that body of work, and on the margin, being more consistent than less. With that, we're going to wrap this one. I will remind people that we're on YouTube now. So if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, you can go to YouTube and just search Rogue Running and you'll find us. We've got these podcasts now in video form, so go check them out. We're building that version of our platform, and then obviously the audio channels are still there. If you're listening that way, you probably already know that. So go check that out. And then, of course, you can find our book, Running the Rogue Way, on our Instagram, link in bio kind of spot. And then, as always, you can check us out at roguerunning.com or follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Rogue Running. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.